entire situation in the first hour. You can catch it on a different stream if you want to. And as I said before, the next show cycle we're going to do is around the Great Reset. Who really runs the world? What is the agenda? What's going to happen? And I hate to say it, Dave. I hate to say it.
Uh-oh.
We've been on the money with pretty much everything.
I know.
All right? I mean, and to the point where it's actually scary. I tell you a quick story before I get into today's show. Very, very quick story. I used to read the tarot. More for fun than anything. It's a family thing, and most people in the family do either, they read the palm, or they do tarot, or do some kind of clairvoyancy type thing. It's just a thing that the family does. And I read it for the partner of a friend or a colleague. This is probably close to 20 years ago. Yeah, about that actually. And I read this death of someone, and it had something to do with the throat. Right? That's what I saw when I did the tarot. Just as sort of pictures in your head, they reveal themselves. I can't explain it any other way. It just doesn't make any logical sense at all. And lo and behold, a year or so after I'd done the reading, the partner of the friend, we have a conversation, and she tells me, "Oh yeah, and I said it was a distant person. That person, thought it would be a throat element. She tells me that her distant uncle, or an uncle that she hadn't been in contact with long time, died of throat cancer. And at that point, I know that was the point I no longer did the tarot. I haven't touched the tarot since then, and I haven't done any readings for the simple fact that was too close for comfort. I don't mind being right about things that are positive or even warnings. That's all goodness. But seeing someone's death, that sort of didn't sit right with me. So like I said, I haven't touched it. And it's the same with the show, Dave. We've talked about a lot of things. I don't want to call them predictions because that would land at some kind of supernatural dimension. It is more educated understanding of what the future can hold, really, and then trying to unlock, especially through the means of the great hypothesis as to what's going to go down. And then to that end, we actually, every show that we do has filled us into the great hypothesis, including Bigfoot. And why is that, and how is that? Well, look, Bigfoot is a global phenomenon. And I call it Bigfoot, I could call it Yeti, I could call it something else, doesn't really matter, Sasquatch, or, it describes the same phenomenon. And the last week, we spent some time talking to you around the globality of this phenomenon. So this is not an North American thing. It's not even a Tibetan thing. I guess it's everywhere, including Australia, right? And in the last example we have for you today is from Japan specifically, and I'll get Dave to share it with you, because I think I scanned it, Dave. I think all the words are good. But the Hibagon is the one I'm going to get you to share it in a second. So, but it's a global phenomenon, and most of the things we are investigating here are in fact global phenomena, even if they're not perceived that way. In fact, some of the phenomena we've discussed with you are universal or solar system phenomena here, and we've gone that far. The anomalies in our solar system, the anomalies in the universe in general, our own little galaxy, the Milky Way, a lot of things that just don't add up, from quantum physics and relativity, the cutting edge of science, it all hangs together. And this phenomenon also hangs in there. You see, we think we know it all, but we don't. And the mystery of it escapes us because we are too confident, we are too cocky, we've got too much hubris in our ability or in our perceived ability to just deal with everything on a scientific basis. I think it's a complete nonsense. Right, Dave? I mean, every day we are thrown into situations where science is not going to do anything for you. In fact, science is not helping you at all. You have to find a new science, a new scientific method. You have to find a new way of examining and determining the true nature of these phenomena. We must understand them. We must. And sometimes, you know what? I think Arthur C. Clarke or Isaac Asimov said it. One of them, great science fiction writers, and also scientists in their own right. They said the next level of evolution, pardon me for using the term, is intuition. It's nice to get all the dots together, but you have to intuit. We'll come to a point where we have to intuit the nature of reality.
Yeah.
If there's too much information, it'll just be a feeling inside, and
that's bang on the money.
Expand. Yeah, 100%. Anyway, but why don't you tell us about the Hibagon?
Yeah, the Hibagon, or Hinagon, depending on where you are, north or south, is the Japanese equivalent of the North American Bigfoot or the Himalayan Yeti. The history of the Hibagon is, well, it's described as a black creature with white hands and large white feet, standing about 5 feet tall. Sightings have not been reported in forested, mountainous areas of the country. Around Mount Heba, where Hibagon comes from, in the Hiroshima prefecture, and has been said to resemble a gorilla. The Hibagon, is a quote, has a large nose, large, deep, glaring eyes, and is covered with bristles. Theories to account for this cryptid range from a gorilla, a wild man, a deserter from the Japanese chefs, to an individual ravaged by atomic radiation from the nuclear attack on Hiroshima. A sighting from 1972 reports that the creature has a chocolate brown face and is covered with brown hair, and is said to have deep glaring eyes. In 2 reports by a Mr. Sazawa and a Mrs. Harada, the creature took no hostile action and fled from 4 armed residents intent on hunting it.
That's right. So that rounds out our global perspective. So, like I said, we spoke about Japan now. The Australian element was mentioned. It's also quite a common sight in the Caucasus, in China, in the Himalayas, of course, right, in North America. It literally is everywhere. It's astounding. It truly is. So it seems a phenomenon that describes a range of different creatures, right? And maybe in a less critical time, these reports would have been more prevalent. So what I mean by that is, I think in the old days, people were more likely to report something unusual, right? These days, if you do that, there's a lot of judgment that goes with that, and people are, very cautious. Is probably the best word. Right? They're less inclined to share their experiences because there might be ridicule, there might be other negative effects, even psychological or psychiatric evaluations potentially. So it's that's with any phenomenon, not just Bigfoot, but it could be UFOs, could be anything that's paranormal. MEs, the Mandela effects, etc. It could be anything really, and people are just very reluctant to talk about it. There are some newspaper clippings here, and I think Dave put them together, which I think is brilliant. And they go back to the turn of the century, 19th century, that is, or the 20th century, 1900, and this one from the 1950s, and then we've got one here from 1937 as well. We'll give you the gist of it. Dave, you want to do the first one? Or?
Yeah, sure. This is the Nimboy tribe, police station in Nimboidia, the 1st of June 1900, from the editor of Science of Man. Sir, with reference to the Aborigines at Nimboida, I beg to report that the name of this tribe is the Nimboy, which is a black's name, but none of the Aboriginals here know the meaning of it. The Aborigines living here are the remains of 3 different tribes, viz. Nimboy, Kangaroo Creek, and Bakarumbi, or Bakarumbi. The original boundary of this tribe was the range dividing Nimboida River from Kangaroo Creek on the north and east, Boundary Creek on the west, and the top of the range forming the tableland of New England on the south. Mixgawin. A ghost is supposed to be a wild, hairy man wandering about the bush on the tops of the mountains, but is perfectly harmless and only frightens people. The last man is supposed to be the last man of the tribe to die, and is called Minane.
Interesting. So that's with reference to different Aboriginal traditions of these wild men, these Yowies or Yahoos. This one is from the late 1950s. We don't have the exact date. It's from People magazine, and it's the wild man Duliga. The Aborigines of the south coast of New South Wales firmly believed in the existence of a hairy man they called Duliga. He lived in the rugged mountains, coming down to the settled areas after sunset to steal food and occasionally to deal out punishment. Duliga had extraordinary strength. These Aborigines also believed a hairy wild man lived in Gingara Mountain, which they avoided. This is from Eureka in New South Wales.
Oh my goodness. Okay, this one's a little harder to read. That's okay. I'm just zooming in. It should be fine. Okay, so 6. The Yerry Wahoo. Matthews relates a legend current amongst the natives of the southeast coast of New South Wales concerning a creature called the Yaruma. According to them, it was a creature closely resembling a man, but of greater stature and having hair all over the body. J.N. Kumbangare told me that big hairy men lived in the scrub in Nana Glen, which is North Coast, New South Wales, and were called by the natives Yerry Wahoo. On one occasion, the Curry, original man, who found a turkey's nest, made a fire to cook the eggs. That's a scrub turkey, by the way. We have them at my house. And they build like a huge mound, it's like a Volkswagen Beetle mound size. Whilst he was cooking them, the Yerry Wahoo arrived, and as the curry turned one, as he created one, the cooked egg, the Yerry Wahoo turned another. So turning the eggs together, one each. The curry became angered at this, spat at the Yerry Wahoo, who, returning the compliment, was struck on the leg with a tomahawk. As he was struck, he cried out, "Coin!" which brought up his companions. They charged the curry, and to impede his retreat, threw a fog in front of him, but he escaped. The Yerry Wahoo were never known to come out of the scrub, but the Jaradis, whom the Kambangarai called Nalangara, used to hunt and kill them. The Yerry Wahoo killed the curry when they caught them. A Crown Land surveyor informed me, this is the writer of the story, that he lived as a boy in the Mudgee district. That's where my friends live. Whereas it's over there it's in the plateau, so it's in the flatlands on the other side of the Great Dividing Range in New South Wales, where a scrubby place was reputed to be the abode of a Yahoo. And a resident in the Maitland district told me a Yahoo was reputed to live in a thick scrub there. That's not far from me, Mick. It's like 40 minutes drive. Each said he was a big hairy man. What is the foundation of these legends can now only be a matter of conjecture. I did get reliable evidence of a tribe of Aborigines who lived in the brushes of the Manning River. That's up near my dad. This has got everything I know, Mickey. Who practiced cannibalism. They were driven there by the Warimi, who called them man-eaters. Some similar circumstances in the distant past may have given rise to the story, and as time went on, the fearsome qualities and appearance of the outcast were exaggerated, and the legend gives us now a creature which is described only as it exists in the imagination of the fearful.
It's always good to come up with a comforting explanation.
Oh, I feel much better, Mickey.
Aren't you?
Yeah.
That's good, man. The next bit, which is a fairly lengthy bit, we took from the work by Michael Primo, Forbidden Archaeology, and he spends a lot of time discussing. In fact, this book is called The Hidden History of the Human Race by Michael Primo, and it's an abridged version of Forbidden Archaeology. And this is pages 168 to 182, in case anybody wants to have a look at them, themselves. But he put a lot of thought and interpretation in this as well. And I did like his, his take on the extreme antiquity of the human race, and this sort of falls in with it. So he's a proponent of cohabitation. So yeah, evolution, sure, whatever. But he also believes, along with so many others, including myself, that forever really, we have shared this planet with all the species that we find in the fossil record. Such as Homo erectus, Homo habilis, Homo ergaster, etc., etc. So these are not necessarily, in my opinion, again, I'll get a lot of hate for that, which is okay. In my opinion, they are not necessarily our ancestors, but rather our contemporaries. In the same way that Homo florensis and Denisovan man and Neanderthal are also our contemporaries, and in fact more than contemporaries, they were the same species as, and we interbred with it. If you think of Homo erectus and Homo ergaster, you're probably better off thinking of them as a orangutan, a gorilla, or chimpanzee, or even a bonobo, being our contemporaries at the moment. Okay, because if you were looking at the fossil record in let's call it 10,000 years or 100,000 years from now, you'll find Homo sapiens skeleton next to that of the gorilla, and you go, oh, this is very strange. That can't be true. Gorillas could possibly have co-inhabited the world with human beings, clearly. So look, it's all a matter of perspective. But I believe that these hominoids, if you will, the Yeti and the Alma, etc., they are ancient lineages that have survived, that have been living with us on this planet for a very long time indeed, and they've just become very, very good at hiding. And I really believe that they have a very high level of civilization backing them up, potentially quite different from ours, potentially inner earthers, potentially elsewhere. Because whenever you have these ape men, as they're called in a not too nice a term, there's also UFO activity and other paranormal activity. And let's not forget all the disappearances that are happening in the national forests.
411 people.
Bingo, right? We actually had the gentleman who was very interesting. Mm-hmm. We had him on our show. Yes, okay, so living ape man, question mark, right? Reviewing, this is now the extracts we're going to take from the book to share with you. I do urge you to buy the book yourselves, okay? Hidden History of Mankind, the Hidden History of Mankind. Reviewing the fossil hominids of China, we found, these are the authors of the book, of course, Michael Primo and Thompson, that humans may have coexisted with more ape-like hominids throughout the Pleistocene. This may be true even today. So their research, which started out at a very different spot, Dave, this is really the key thing here, right, as well, has led them to also investigate Yeti and Bigfoot, right? Because they looked at the extreme antiquity of human beings, and they found they had been cohabiting the planet with creatures like Homo erectus, etc. And then why wouldn't that continue today? This may be true even today. Over the past 100 years or so, researchers have accumulated substantial evidence that creatures resembling Neanderthals, Homo erectus, and the Australopithecines even now roam wilderness areas of the world. Professional scientists have 1. Observed wildmen in natural surroundings. 2. Observed live capture specimens. 3. Observed dead specimens. And 4. Collected physical evidence for wildmen, including hundreds of footprints. They have also interviewed non-scientists, informants, and obviously local, right? And investigated the vast amount of wildman lore contained in ancient literature and traditions. Cryptozoology. For some researchers, the study of creatures such as wildmen comes under the heading of a genuine branch of science called cryptozoology. Cryptozoology, a term coined by the French zoologist Bernard Heuvelmans, refers to the scientific investigation of species whose existence has been reported but not fully documented. The Greek word cryptos means hidden, so cryptozoology literally means the study of hidden animals. There exists an international society of cryptozoology, the board of directors of which includes professional biologists, zoologists, and paleontologists from universities and museums around the world. The purpose of the society, as stated in its journal Cryptozoology, is The investigation, analysis, publication, and discussion of all matters related to animals of unexpected form or size or unexpected occurrence in time or space. A typical issue of Cryptozoology usually contains one or more articles by scientists on the topic of wildmen. Is it really possible that there could be an unknown species of hominid on this planet? Many will find this hard to believe for two reasons. They suppose that every inch of the Earth has been quite thoroughly explored, and they also suppose that scientists possess a complete inventory of the Earth's living animal species. Both suppositions are incorrect. First, and this is something we harp on all the time, we haven't set foot in vast areas of this planet, and certainly not on a regular basis anyway. Now, back to the text. First, even in countries such as the United States, there remain vast, unpopulated and little-traveled areas. In particular, the northwestern United States still has large regions of densely forested, mountainous terrain which, although mapped from the air, are rarely penetrated by humans on the ground, especially Washington State, believe it or not. Washington State has one of the largest areas of untouched wilderness in the United States. Second, a surprising number of new species of animals are still being found each year. About 5,000, according to a conservative estimate. As might be suspected, the great majority of these, some 4,000, are insects. Makes sense. Yet Heuvelmans in 1983 noted the following. Quite recently, in the mid-1970s, there were discovered each year around 112 new species of fish, 18 new species of reptiles, about 10 new species of amphibians, the same number of mammals, and 3 or 4 new species of birds. Dave?
Yeah. So European wildmen. Reports of wildmen go back a long time. Many art objects of the Greeks, Romans, Carthaginians, that'll do, and Etruscans bear images of semi-human creatures. For example, in the Museum of Prehistory in Rome, there is a Etruscan silver bowl on which may be seen, among human hunters and on horses, the figure of a large ape-man-like creature. During the Middle Ages, wild men continued to be depicted in European art and architecture. A page from Queen Mary's Psalter, composed in the 14th century, shows a very realistically depicted hairy wild man being attacked by a pack of dogs. For centuries, this is northwestern North America. For centuries, the Indians in the northwestern United States and western Canada have believed in the reality of wild men, known by various names such as Sasquatch. In 1792, the Spanish botanist naturalist Jose Mariano Mozino, describing the Indians of Nootka Sound on Vancouver Island, Canada, stated, and is quoted, "I do not know what to say about Matlocks, inhabitant of the mountainous district, of whom all have unbelievable terror. They imagined his body as very monstrous, all covered with stiff black bristles, a head similar to a human one, but with much greater, sharper, and stronger fangs than those of the bear, extremely long arms, and toes, and fingers, armed with long, curved claws," unquote. US President Theodore Roosevelt included an intriguing wild man report in his 1906 book, The Wilderness Hunter. The incident took place in the Bitterroot Mountains between Idaho and Montana. Wild man reports still come out of this region. According to Roosevelt, in the early to middle 1800s, a trapper named Bauman and his partner were exploring a particularly wild and lonely pass. An unknown creature ravaged their camp several times at night. When they could not see the large animal clearly, and in the day when they weren't when they were absent. One day, Baumann found his partner dead in the camp, apparently killed by the creature. The creature left footprints that were quite human-like. And unlike a bear, which normally walks on all four legs, this creature walked on two. Taken on its own, the Baumann story is not very impressive as evidence for the existence of wild men in North America, but when considered along with the more substantive reports, it acquires greater significance. On July 4, 1884, The Colonist, a newspaper published in Victoria, British Columbia, carried a story about a strange creature captured near the town of Yale. The Colonist reported Jacko, as the creature has been called by its captors, is something of a gorilla type, standing about 4 feet 7 inches in height and weighing 127 pounds. He has long, black, strong hair and resembles a human being with one exception: his entire body, excepting his hands or paws and feet, is covered with glossy hair about 1 inch long. His forearm is much longer than a man's forearm, and he possesses extraordinary strength. That the creature was not a gorilla seems clear. Its weight was too small. Some might suppose that Jacko was a chimpanzee, but the idea was apparently considered and rejected by persons who were familiar with Jacko. In 1961, zoologist Ivan Sanderson mentioned, quoted, a comment made in another paper shortly after the original story was published, and which asked how anyone could suggest that Jacko could have been a chimpanzee that had escaped from a circus. Additional reports of creatures like Jacko came from this same region. For example, Alexander Caulfield Anderson, a surveyor for the Hudson Bay Company, reported that some hairy humanoid creatures had several times thrown rocks at his party as they surveyed a trade route in 1864. In 1901, Mike King, a well-known lumberman, was working in an isolated region in northern Vancouver Island. As King came over a ridge, he spotted a large human-like creature covered with reddish-brown fur. On the bank of a creek, the creature was washing some roots and placing them in 2 orderly piles beside him. The creature then left, running like a human being. Footprints observed by King were distinctly human, except for the phenomenally large and spreading toes. In 1941, the several members of the Chapman family encountered a wild man at Ruby Creek, British Columbia. On a sunny summer afternoon, Mrs. Chapman's oldest son alerted her to the presence of a large animal coming down out of the woods near their home. At first, she thought it was a large bear, but then, much to her horror, she saw that it was a gigantic man covered all over with yellow-brown hair. The hair was about 4 inches long. The creature moved directly towards the house, and Mrs. Chapman rounded up her 3 children and fled downstream to the village. Mekki.
In October of 1955, Mr. William Rowe, who had spent much of his life hunting wild animals and observing their habits, encountered a wild man. The incident took place near a little town called Tete Jaunikash in British Columbia. One day, said Rowe in a sworn statement, he climbed up Nika Mountain to an old deserted mine and saw at a distance of about 75 yards what he first took to be a bear. When the creature stepped out into a clearing, Rowe realized that it was something different. My first impression was of a huge man, about 6 feet tall, almost 3 feet wide, and probably weighing somewhere near 300 pounds. It was covered from head to foot with dark brown, silver-tipped hair, but as it came closer, I saw by its breasts that it was female. In 1967, in the Bluff Creek region of Northern California, Roger Patterson and Bob Gimlin managed to shoot a short color film of a female Sasquatch. They also made casts of her footprints, which were 14 inches long. Several opinions have been expressed about this film, and look, esteemed listeners, this is probably the most famous image of Bigfoot that we have in the world. You know, it's just it's not behind the log, and it's taken from it's a still taken from the film. While some authorities, going back to the text, have said it's an outright fake, others have said they think it provides good evidence in favor of the reality of the Sasquatch. Mixed opinions have also been put forward. Dr. D.W. Grieve, an anatomist specializing in human walking, studied the film and had this to say, I'm quoting, "My subjective impressions have oscillated between total acceptance of the Sasquatch on the grounds that the film would be difficult to fake, to one of irrational rejection based on an emotional response to the possibility that the Sasquatch actually exists." So let me say this again. My subjective impressions have oscillated between total acceptance of the Sasquatch on the grounds that the film would be difficult to fake, to one of irrational rejection based on an emotional response to the possibility that a Sasquatch actually exists. And I think that kind of attitude is quite common when it comes to this phenomena. And remember when we talked about the extreme antiquity for human beings?
Yes.
And the common argument was, well, if it was found in this strata, then it couldn't possibly be either that old, so it is an intrusive burial, or it's not Homo sapiens. Either way. But it cannot possibly have originated in this stratum if it is Homo sapiens. And that was the argument. If it was found in that stratum, in that layer of earth, then ipso facto, no further proof is required. It is not, in fact, that old. It can't be. It's Homo sapiens. So it's a circular argument, which is not based on fact, but on opinion.
That's the example, well, similar to the example of the strata being between two layer deposits of lava. All right.
Exactly.
Which can't be. There's no intrusion there.
Yeah, that's right. So, but again, this is the similar. This is what is, because we have a certain preconceived notion of reality that has been drummed into our heads, and make no mistake, it has been drummed. That's from our very birth. Very few of us can actually escape this kind of preconceived idea about reality. If you can, and since you're listening to this, you probably can. it is a rare gift. But let's go back to the text. Anthropologist Myra Shackley of the University of Leicester observed that the majority view seems to be that the film could be a hoax, but if so, an incredibly clever one. But this explanation could be used to dismiss almost any kind of scientific evidence whatsoever. All one has to do is posit a sufficiently expert hoaxer. Therefore, the hoax hypothesis should be applied only when there is actual evidence of hoaxing, as at Piltdown, for example. Piltdown Man we mentioned briefly. I won't get into it here. Ideally, one should be able to produce the hoaxer, of course. Furthermore, even a demonstrated case of hoaxing cannot be used to dismiss entire categories of similar evidence, which is true. But it's the same with the crop circle. Sorry to be jumping around.
Or UFOs for that matter, Mickey.
Or UFOs for that matter. But crop circling is pertinent here. I'll tell you why. So crop circles have been turning up for hundreds of years, all over the place, different countries. A lot of them in England, or Great Britain, I should say. Right? So what they find these two guys with a piece of string and a bit of
a plank of wood. Yeah.
Plank of wood. They said, yeah, we've made them all. Well, first of all, they would be the most prolific people in the world doing anything if they had in fact created these hundreds, if not thousands, of crop circles. That's one. But let's say that, or maybe they had another 1,000 followers that could help them. There's one critical difference between a crop circle that was done in the way they said they did it, right? So they've said, okay, this is how we do it, and we trample down the ground with the rope, and there's a plank of wood, and that's how we do it. And then there's the other kind, which is not done this way. What's the difference? The difference is, if it is done the way the people or the two men said they did it, you're destroying the crop. You're actually damaging.
It breaks the stems, the stalk. Yeah.
So it's dead. It doesn't grow. It's dead. A crop circle, an actual crop circle. The funny thing is this: it is not trampled down. It is not killed. It's almost like gently persuaded down, if you will, right? In fairly intricate woven patterns too. Right? But the point is, it's alive. It keeps growing. An actual crop circle doesn't destroy the crop. The fake crop circle absolutely does. Sorry, I just had to get off my chest. As far as, going back to the text, as far as Sasquatch footprints are concerned, independent witnesses have examined and reported hundreds of sets of footprints, that is, and of these, more than 100 have been preserved in photographs and casts. Critics, however, assert that all these footprints have been faked. Undoubtedly, some footprints have been faked, a fact that the staunchest supporters for the Sasquatch will readily admit. But could every single one of them be a hoax? And again, not to belabor the point, and I've said this many times now, for the UFO, all we talk about UFO is an unidentified flying object. That's what it means. Not spacecraft. That's not what it says.
Mm-hmm.
Unidentified object. For that phenomenon to be real, only one sighting has to be real. One, just the one sighting. Any phenomenon that we observe with thousands of sightings, be it UFO, Bigfoot, sea serpents, whatever, right? Any of those. Only one has to be real for the phenomenon to be real. You can have 10,000 sightings and 9,999 can be hoaxes, misidentifications, errors of perceptions, blah, 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 low-flying geese and swamp gas and all these wonderful things. But only the one has to be true for the phenomenon to be true. So this
Mickey,
is not...
so just to go on, so to continue the thought stream here, liken it also to the Kraken stories of the giant squid being able to take men off the deck. Well, that was not believed at all, disbelieved, and however it became a thing when they found a 20-meter long squid.
And on the beach in New Zealand.
Yeah, that's right, because they breed just off New Zealand, right, on the west coast, on the east coast. So it became a thing. Up until then, it was phooey, right? You're all just been drinking too much rum, and and that's I'm not going to believe a word you say.
Rum and scurvy.
So, but that's how simple it is. You find one, and then it's hey, wait a minute, that's a thing. Yeah, like the Tic Tac, Mickey. The Tic Tac. We're going to have George Simpson back on. We're going to have a round table talking about what does it mean today. This. If one Bigfoot is real, then they are real. It doesn't mean all of them are real. Just they are real. It's a real thing.
It's a thing.
Yeah.
100%. And that's. I mean, the gorilla had the same issue. The mountain gorilla, right? In the year 1900, they thought it was a myth. It was not can't be real. Then they found them, and now they're hunted to extinction. So, I think they should have stayed in there. But and the kraken or the gigantic squid. There are very few bones, and so you don't find them in the fossil record. They don't
fossil up much, to be honest.
Yeah. And when they die, they don't, because they're fairly deep, right? When either they're eaten up, or by the time they get
Megalodon.
to the beach, there have been finds prior to this one.
That's right.
This was probably the best preserved recently, a few years ago now.
Now there's heaps. We've discovered heaps.
Yeah, but they had found other ones prior to that in the 60s, 70s, etc. But they were so decomposed, nobody could make heads or tails.
That's right.
And so it was dismissed as, who knows what it is.
That's a lot of calamari.
But it does take it. We are all doubting Thomases. Not to, I don't want to overstrain my Bible knowledge here, but we're all doubting Thomases. We need to touch it. We need to see it for ourselves before we're convinced. And that's fair. That's a fair attitude.
I think people have the same attitude towards the virus, Mickey, unless it's come to my town or affected me or someone I know, then it doesn't exist. Same. It's the same, isn't it?
You're right. No, but look, and the thing is this, though, right? But what we should not do is we should not automatically flip to the negative.
Yeah.
So just because we haven't got proof positive, right, doesn't mean it isn't true. It doesn't, right? There are many examples in science where, no, it is true. Oh, look at that. It did happen. So we have to be very careful with our judgment, right? And an open mind. An open mind is the best scientific tool you can ever get. Going back to the text. In 1973, John R. Napier, a respected British anatomist, stated that if all the prints are fakes, then we must be prepared to accept the existence of a conspiracy of mafia-like ramifications, with cells in practically every major township from San Francisco to Vancouver. Napier declared that he found the prints he himself studied biologically convincing. Napier wrote the following: "The evidence that I have examined persuades me that some of the tracks are real, and that they are man-like in form. I am convinced that the Sasquatch exists. Grover Krantz, an anthropologist at Washington State University, was initially skeptical of Sasquatch reports. In order to determine whether or not the creature really existed, Krantz studied in detail some prints found in 1970 in northeast Washington State. In reconstructing the skeletal structure of the foot from the print, he noted that the ankle was positioned more forward than in a human foot. Taking into consideration the reported height and weight of an adult Sasquatch, Krantz, using his knowledge of physical anthropology, calculated just how far forward the ankle would have to be set. Returning to the prints, he found that the position of the ankle exactly matched his theoretical calculations. That's when I decided the thing is real, said Krantz. He goes on, there's no way a faker could have known how far forward to set that ankle. It took me a couple of months to work it out with the casts in hand. So you have to figure out how much smarter a faker would have to be. Krantz and wildman expert John Green have written extensive reports on North American footprint evidence. Typically the prints are 14 to 18 inches long and 5 to 9 inches wide, giving a surface roughly 3 to 4 times larger than that of an average human foot. It's quite significant. Hence the popular name Bigfoot, of course. Krantz estimated that to make typical Sasquatch prints, a total weight of at least 700 pounds is required. Thus, a 200-pound man would have to be carrying at least 500 pounds to make a good print.
Goodness.
But that is only the beginning. There are reports of series of prints extending from 3/4 of a mile up to several miles in deserted regions far away from the nearest roads. The stride length of a Sasquatch varies from 4 to 6 feet. The stride length of an average man is about 3 feet. Try walking a mile with at least 500 pounds on your back and taking strides 5 feet long. See, Dave, this is really where the feasibility and just the why. You remember we talked about this in when we looked at these massive stones that were used in ancient buildings. Like weighing 1,000 tons. Not so much how. I mean, it was done, so it had to be done somehow.
It was done. We can see it. It's there.
It was done, right? But more to the point, why?
That's right.
What's the motivation? Why would you do it, right? Same with this. Why would you create these prints that might not have a good chance of being found in the first place, but in order to make them and to have them sink into the ground as much as you need them to, right? To carry 250, that's like 2 men. You have to carry 2 men on your back.
You got to carry 500 pounds of stuff and walk unbelievably long strides properly for it to work.
So,
that's ridiculous.
So it all becomes. See, it's nice to be an armchair skeptic. This is not a dig at armchair skeptics at all, of course. Because you don't have to look at it. You don't have to look at the logical motivation of these hoaxes. You just say it's a hoax. That's the end of the story. It's a hoax. It's a hoaxer. Done. I no longer have to say anything else. I don't have to justify it. I don't look at the motivation. I don't care. I don't even look at the practicality of it because it's no longer a discussion point. It's a hoaxer.
I've just shut it down in my mind and it doesn't exist. La 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 la. Fingers in ears, can't hear.
And again, I know I need to draw a longer bow here. That is the case for virtually all of the armchair skeptics. I mean, they're real skeptics. Being a skeptic is a good thing. It's not a bad thing. Being a skeptic simply means, well, you can't be taken for a fool. You need evidence. And that's a good thing. Of course you need evidence. We all need evidence. But being a skeptic also doesn't mean I'll just say no to everything. Not possible. No. And it requires extraordinary evidence. No, it doesn't require extraordinary evidence. It requires just normal evidence. Any evidence will do, as long as there's evidence. There's some evidence here, right? So these statements are being made, which are completely nonsensical. They don't even, if you look at it from a mental point of view, they don't even make any sense.
No.
It doesn't. So we are now. See, this is really the crux of it. This is where everybody gets caught up in. Nobody is willing to look at the logical picture, and that's why I included this text here. This text is just a wonderful way of illustrating the massive issues we have in investigating our planet, right? Because as soon as you say hoaxer or pseudoscience or whatever you want to do, it's no longer of interest to people in the scientific community, even if they had an interest. And trust me, people have an interest. Scientists want to know stuff, but they're terrified to touch any of this stuff. At the end of tenure, how do I make my money? Being a scientist is first of all, I think being a scientist is a very brave decision to make as a career choice.
It sure is.
I really do. I think it is, right? Because the money ain't great unless you get very, very lucky. right? And if you're really, really smart, and the NSA is going to lock you up in some bunker in Alaska, right? but the point here is that because it is such a tenuous thing, and unless you're a really brilliant scientist, and we can demand a certain amount of money and maybe even have an unorthodox opinion. The vast majority of scientists, they just have to make a living, right? I mean, it's just, and they just have to toe the line. Got to toe the line. Got to toe the line. Imagine you're a Catholic priest and I don't really believe in God anymore. Yeah, that wouldn't work because that's the whole thing. I mean, you're a Catholic priest. I mean, how can you be part of a Catholic church if you don't believe in God? You can't, right? I don't believe in evolution anymore. Ooh. Bad choice, George.
Look, I'm not going against religion at all, but if I was to post something about religion today, or say about maybe someone in a great powerful position right now, my post might be fact checked, and I give them a 100% marks if they can fact check God.
Wouldn't that be nice?
Good luck with that.
That's that. Now, Napier goes on to say the following. A footprint machine, a kind of mechanical stamp, has been suggested, but an apparatus capable of delivering thrust of approximately 800 pounds per square foot that can be manhandled over rough and mountainous country puts a strain on one's credulity. Some of the reported series of tracks were in fresh snow, enabling observers to verify that no other marks were made by some machine paralleling the prints or hovering over them. In some cases, the distance between the toes of the footprints varied from one print to the next in a single series of prints. This means that besides all the other problems facing a hoaxer, he would have had to incorporate moving parts into his artificial feet. Dave?
On June 10th, 1982, that's when I went to the US and I started school over there, Paul Freeman, a US Forest Service patrolman tracking elk in the Walla Walla district of Washington State, observed a hairy biped around 8 foot tall. That's quite tall. Standing about 60 yards from him. After 30 seconds, the large animal walked away. Krantz studied cast of the creature's footprints and found dermal ridges, sweat pores, and other features in the proper places for large primate feet. Detailed skin impressions on the side walls of the prints indicated the presence of a flexible sole pad. In the face of much good evidence, why do almost all anthropologists and zoologists remain silent about Sasquatch? Krantz observed, they are scared for their reputations and their jobs. Napier similarly noted, one of the problems, perhaps the greatest problem in investigating Sasquatch sightings, is the suspicion with which people who claim to have seen a Sasquatch are treated by their neighbours and employers. To admit such an experience is, in some areas, to risk personal reputation, social status and professional credibility. In particular, he told of the case of a highly qualified oil company geologist who told his story but insisted that his name should not be mentioned for fear of dismissal by his company. In this regard, Roderick Sprague, an anthropologist from the University of Idaho, said of Krantz, it is Krantz's willingness to openly investigate the unknown that has cost him the respect of many colleagues as well as timely academic promotion.
Right.
Yep, go on.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I think take it.
I just wanted to say very quickly, people always say, oh no, there's no bias in science, there's no filter in science. There's no deliberate effort to keep these opinions out. People are being punished directly. I mean, Elizabeth Steen McIntyre, a very small infraction if you think about it. Krantz's infraction is much greater. Of course, he's seriously investigating Sasquatch, etc.
Yes.
But there is punishment for these people. Like I said, you can't be a priest in the Catholic Church if you don't believe in God. It doesn't work. Right? Sorry, go ahead.
No, you're absolutely right. I did a Montgomery Burns impression. The majority of the Sasquatch reports come from the northwestern United States and British Columbia. One is forced to conclude said Napier, that a man-like life form of gigantic proportions is living at the present time in the wild areas of the northwestern United States and British Columbia. There are also numerous reports from the eastern parts of the United States and Canada that such a creature should be alive and kicking in our midst, unrecognized and unclassifiable. It's a profound blow to the credibility of modern anthropology, concluded Napier. It might also be said that it is a blow to the credibility of biology, zoology, and science in general. Mackie.
Central and South America. From southern Mexico's tropical forests come accounts of beings called the Sissimite. Wendell Skousen, a journalist, said the people of Cubulco in Baja Verapaz reported, "There live in the mountains very big wild men, completely clothed in short, thick brown hairy fur, with no necks, small eyes, long arms, and huge hands. They leave footprints twice the length of a man's." Several persons said that they had been chased down mountainsides by the Sissimite. Skousen thought the creature may have been a bear. However, upon questioning the natives carefully, he decided it was not. Similar creatures are reported in Guatemala, where it has been said they kidnap women and children. People in Belize, former British Honduras, speak of semi-human creatures called duendes, which inhabit the jungles in the southern part of their country. The name duende comes from the Spanish word duende, meaning goblin. Ivan Sanderson, who conducted research in Belize, wrote in 1961, "Dozens told me of having seen them, and these were mostly men of substance who had worked for responsible organizations like the Forestry Department, and who had, in several cases, been schooled or trained either in Europe or the United States." One, a junior forestry officer born locally, described in great detail two of these little creatures that he had suddenly noticed quietly watching him on several occasions, at the edge of the forestry reserve near the foot of the Maya Mountains. These little folk were described as being between 3'6" and 4'6", well proportioned, but with very heavy shoulders and rather long arms, clothed in thick, tight, close brown hair, looking like that of a short-coated dog, having very flat yellowish faces, but head hair no longer than the body hair, except on the back of the neck and mid-back. The duendes appear to represent a species different from the large Sasquatch of the Pacific Northwest and North America. And we said this before, there seem to be very many different kinds of species of these, well, let's call them wild men or wild women. So you can see there's quite a few examples here from the South Americas, and which is why we didn't hear about that before, because there's such a treasure trove. From the Guayanas, region of South America, come accounts of wild men called didis. Early explorers heard reports about them from the Indians, who said they were about 5 feet tall, walked erect, and were covered with thick black fur. It seems like in the southern, or in South America, you have these smaller creatures or people, whereas in the North American continent, they're significantly larger. In 1931, Nello Beccari, an anthropologist from Italy, heard an account of the didi from Mr. Haynes, the resident magistrate in British Guiana. Heuvelmans gave the following summary of what Haynes related to Beccari, and this I'm quoting here. In 1910, he was going through the forest along the Cunnawarrock, a tributary which joins the Essequibo, just above its junction with the Potaro, when he suddenly came upon two strange creatures, which stood up on their hind feet when they saw him. They had human features, but were entirely covered with reddish-brown fur. The two creatures retreated slowly and disappeared into the forest. After giving many similar accounts in his book about wild men, Sanderson stated the following: "The most significant single fact about these reports from Guyana is that never once has any local person, nor any person reporting what a local person says, so much as indicated that these creatures are just monkeys. In all cases, they have specified that they are tailless, erect, and have human attributes." Well, this is from the locals, okay? From the eastern slopes of the Andes in Ecuador come reports of the Chiru, a small fur-covered hominid-like creature, about 4 to 5 feet tall. In Brazil, people tell of the large ape-like mapinguari, which leaves giant human-like footprints and is set to kill cattle. Let me pause here for a second.
1 minute.
No, so. Oh, okay. Yeah, we'll definitely pause it for. And look, we've seen here. This is a massive worldwide phenomenon. And again, we put some more detail here around the the South American component of it, and but I was reminded when I read it for the first time of the Homo forensis, the little hobbits that we recently found in Papua New Guinea. So clearly, if they existed there, then they could have existed anywhere, really. Right? I mean, there's no real reason why they couldn't have, and may yet exist to this day. So what I'm saying is as well that these are, I don't think they are different to us or different species to us necessarily. I think interbreeding is possible. And there are a few stories, and they're completely anecdotal, and I have no hard evidence for what I'm saying right now. But I've seen some videos and pictures where it is said that these creatures, or people, if you will, have interbred with us, creating, some kind of hybrid life form.
Yeah.
And that's the music. Jerbear is coming up, I'm sure, with an awesome roundtable. So don't go away. Donate if you can. Listen up on the radio, Dave.
Sure is. And from Neki and I, from Shiny Side Out, have a great week, and we'll catch you next week for show number 454. Take care until then.